These are the basics.
Really good details and enthusiasm.
Word choices, the images, the metaphors, engage with what the author has written.
In your own words.
Think about storytellers in your life.
Those words are going to tell you more about the author than you ever thought possible.
You're making decisions about
you
your
do
writing.
have a place in the overall conversation on paper.
See where your story goes from there.
Good luck.
Hi, I'm Ann Helms. I'm the head of the English department here at ACC, and we're going to look at how to write a literacy narrative. Let's take the word literacy first. It's the same as the word literate. We think of whether people can read and write. Well, of course you can read and write. You're college students. But what else could we be looking at for a college level paper? You're looking at things about how you learn to read and write, what kinds of important things might have been formative in those processes for you. And so you'll be telling us a story about that. The fact that it's a narrative basically says that it is a story. You can think about stories in all kinds of parts of your life. If you want to think about what makes a good story, you might think about storytellers in your life. Maybe you're a really good storyteller, or maybe you have a friend that's a good storyteller, so much so that people turn and listen when they start to tell a story, or you don't mind if they tell it twice. Well, what are the characteristics of that story? What makes it a good story? Probably it has some drama in it. It might have a little bit of surprise somewhere. Probably has some sort of meaning behind it. Probably has really good details and enthusiasm, and you can bring all that into your literacy narrative as you write about it. Timing is probably part of it. You might need to give a little background because other people aren't familiar with your story. They don't know your life. They don't know your family, or they don't know where you came from. So you may need to give us a little bit of that, but not too much, because it can get really bogged down. You don't want to have too many of the wrong kinds of details, but you want to have a lot of the right kind of details. Like, for instance, I had a student one time who wrote about his trip to Costa Rica. He started with when he got in the airplane. He ended with when he got off. It was 18 pages long. You don't want to write that paper. And so what we did with his paper was we went back and tried to figure out what was the point, what mattered to him about going on that trip, and then which of the details mattered for the point that he wanted to make. So you want to figure out really good details that draw people in, that make them part of your story. If I were going to write a literacy narrative about me, I would probably tell you the story of when I was walking across campus one night, 18 years old. Yes, I was once 18 years old. And it was dark and kind of cold, and it was probably November, kind of crisp, really sharp stars. Those are the things I remember. I was really troubled because I was a chemistry major. Obviously, I didn't end up that way. I was doing badly in my chemistry class and in my calculus class. Lab wasn't so bad. I had a good lab partner, but I knew I had to change my life. And I had to do something to make a difference in my path, because I was walking across campus by myself thinking, I'm going to lose my scholarship if I don't do something. And one of the thoughts that came to me was something my aunt Margaret had said. She was a very abrupt kind of person, strong Chicago accent, and she turned to me when she found out that I wanted to major in chemistry and said, "What are you doing majoring in science when you can write like that?" And I ignored it at the time, but that night I remembered it. And I thought, okay, I've always written. I have always been involved with writing. I had entered some contests. I had written from my school paper, but I didn't really think of that as a career. And at that moment, that all changed. And so why am I telling you this story? Because it has some of the elements in it you need for your paper. It has details in it, the stars, the cold, the my aunt's accent, things you can imagine, things you can picture. There were details I left out. It was UNC Charlotte, which is a really modern campus. You might have imagined it somewhere like UNC that is a traditional campus. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant to this story. So I left that out. I put in a quote from my aunt that I remember really vividly. You could have a whole dialogue, a whole scene in your paper if you wanted to. So you're going to want to think about your details in terms of whether they're relevant to the point you want to make, whether they are vivid enough to help people to understand and imagine being there. You'd want to avoid cliches or just sayings that kind of gloss over the surface of the story. You want to get right in there and find really specific things to say. And any quotes that you can include, any dialogue are going to help make your story more vivid. How are you going to organize it? You could start at the beginning, You can start in the middle, you can start in the end. My story kind of started in the middle because it was a point in college. I looked back to when I was in high school. I looked forward a little bit to how my life turned out. So you can start anywhere and then just see where your story goes from there.